Well, hi everyone. I'm John Ritland, and this is my review of Dark Side of the Ring, David Schultz, the slap heard round the world. And all I have to say is that Schultz didn't slap that motherfucker John Stossel nearly hard enough. He should have slapped him. He should have beaten the shit out of him. He would have been well within his right to. And if you're unfamiliar with the story, well, you're coming here for my review. You should watch this episode. It's focusing around one incident where, well, John Stossel, because he decided to poke and prod and be a fucking idiot and then get all upset because he got repercussions for being a moron, got slapped for saying, I think this is fake. Which is the worst fucking thing you can say to a pro wrestler. You can feel however you want about wrestling. There's a bunch of predetermined shit. And in modern wrestling, especially wrestling these days, sure, there's a lot of shit that seems hokey. But these men and women are beating up their bodies and doing a whole bunch of shit to their bodies, traveling up and down the road in cars, on planes, all this, and beating their bodies up for little to a lot of money, depending on the company they work for, but they do it because they love it, because they appreciate it, because they respect it. And John Stossel and Eddie Mansfield in this certainly didn't fucking respect pro wrestling. So I don't want to hear anybody try to defend that stuff. But let's get into this review. Yeah, this one pissed me off. It didn't piss me off as much as the one last week with Jimmy Snuka and the fact that he got away. Well, actually, that was 2 weeks ago. Murdering Nancy Argentino and getting away from it. Getting away with it, that is. But, well, holy fuck. One, David Schultz would not want to fucking mess with the guy even now. He fucking scares me. I was unfamiliar with a lot of his career because I'm 39 years old. By the time I started watching wrestling, Schultz was pretty much was being phased out of wrestling basically because Vince McMahon was a goddamn coward and decided to make him the fall guy. But that's getting ahead. So how was this episode? Pretty goddamn good. Pretty goddamn good, and really made me respect David Schultz a whole lot. And if I could shake his hand, I absolutely would. I'd be terrified because he's fucking scary even now, but, well, I respect the fuck out of him. So, we're talking about the rules of wrestling changing, and Chris Jericho doing a great job narrating this whole season, by the way. And David Schultz was one of the ones who lived his gimmick. He was just himself with the volume turned up to 20, as Jim Cornette would say. There's like a storage container that Schultz has on his many acres that he got with his wrestling money and also with his bounty hunter money. That man being a bounty hunter and coming after you, that's scary. But he had some memorabilia and stuff like that. He showed an action figure, and it was like some business card thing or some card. You just got patronized by the world's greatest wrestler, which is pretty goddamn good. Herb Welch trained him. I would Google to find out more about him if I were you, but definitely somebody that was in wrestling for a lot of goddamn years, and pretty much from, I don't want to say that like the complete dawn of time, but he was very old school and helped train David Schultz. And Jim Cornette talked about history, talked about training those people in a barn, how Herb Welch did that, would actually take shit, put it in his armpit, and then do a headlock and do stuff like that. He would really test a lot of guys to see if they wanted to get into wrestling and actually do it. He told him, don't break kayfabe. You don't want to break kayfabe. You need to learn how to work, Herb would tell him. And there was a Memphis promo where, David Schultz had been in wrestling for a bit, and Memphis, it kind of made sense that he would, get a big start in Memphis, given the area that he lived in. Since he lived somewhere in Tennessee. I'm not exactly sure where, but it looks like it's out in the sticks. And you know what? It's probably for the better that he is in his own little world and away from people, because he seems like a good guy, but he seems like somebody you don't want to fuck with. So he was working with Hogan at that point, and they had worked, I believe, in Florida, and Schultz was working. Schultz had worked with Hogan a little bit there. And then in 1983, we skip ahead a little bit, Hogan's being brought in from the AWA to WWE. Vince wants to, continue his national expansion. He sees Hogan as the guy. And Hogan brings Schultz in. He says, I can make a lot of money with this guy. This guy has been really good. We have done some really, really good shit. We could do some great stuff on the stage. Okay. They show Tuesday Night Titans footage. where Schultz fires a gun and Vince seems legit pissed off, like he didn't know that goddamn thing was loaded. He called him, you stupid idiot. That's where Jericho got it from. No, I think he just came up with it. Or maybe he came up with it from Vince. I don't have a goddamn clue, but Vince seemed legit pissed off. He should have been pissed off about that suit jacket he was wearing. But Vince, Vince was, had footage or had cameras sent to Schultz's house where he was telling, he was being a full-on dick heel. He was just playing up this whole thing, or being himself with the volume turned up at least. But he told his wife to get in the kitchen and clean stuff, and his kids, don't smile at me, I'll slap that smile off your face. And apparently the police believed it. The police wanted his address to get, bring him up on spousal abuse and child abuse charges. That's how much the police believe this shit. You can hear even on Cornette's podcast and various other podcasts, depending on areas you were in the South or, some areas, police believe this shit, and you would really have to fight your way away from the fans or through the fans and even through the cops. You would have to do that. It was crazy. And then you get John Stossel. And let me just say this much. I didn't respect John Stossel before this because of the question he asked, and also the fact he's a right-winger and a whiner. And he sucks up to Trump a lot. So of course he's a goddamn piece of shit. I'm just saying because he would fit in just fine on Fox News, because apparently he loves to whine and complain about shit, and also loves to, needle people and then get upset when he gets his comeuppance, which, to be fair, the guy fucking deserved it. I'm just going to say it right now. He deserved every bit of ridicule that he got. He doesn't quite come off as bad as the police chief when, on the Jimmy Snuka episode, but that, covering up a murder is a little bit worse. Getting paid out for a murder is a little bit worse than just asking about wrestling being a certain word. But he talked about liking wrestling as a kid, but he knew that when he grew up, he knew it was bullshit, and he thought it didn't like people being lied to. It's cleverly done athletic bullshit, but bullshit. 2020 piece, and he didn't like people being bullshitted. Basically, what he was trying to do is he was trying to stay fucking relevant. Now, apparently he had done a lot of news reports before this, and it was rising in popularity. Well, would be the thing he was most famous for, at least as far as wrestling fans go, and he deserves to be ridiculed for this shit. He's a fucking goddamn moron. And he wants to act like he's something big when Schultz did the right thing. And Eddie Mansfield shows footage of his career and the fact that he had more hair back then than he has now. And I know something about not having that much hair. But he was the one, by the way, they show footage of him blading on this 2020 piece because he wasn't getting booked, and as quickly as he rose, he fell. And I guess he's saying that he wanted to get health benefits and health care and stuff like that for the boys, and he wanted to help out the people because there was no 401k, there was no way to take care of the people, that the payoffs weren't nearly enough. Well, maybe the payoffs weren't enough for Eddie Mansfield because he wasn't any fucking good, and he couldn't cut it into bigger territories. I don't know a ton about his mainstream career, but I don't recall him working a lot of places where he would have made a lot of money. And sure, he could talk. Sometimes you could get by on talking, especially back then. But if you couldn't go out there and perform, you weren't able to last all that long. And I say this as somebody that is just a wrestling fan. I will never claim to have been in the ring. I will never claim to have done that. But I can tell you, as somebody that has watched wrestling since he was 4 years old, 1985 War of Cello Score specifically, but I caught other stuff after that. And was really excited to watch WrestleMania, and then found out I wasn't able to go see it because, it wasn't closed circuited anywhere near me. But anyway, I respect the hell out of wrestling. I may take the piss out of some of the people that get in the ring, but everybody that gets in the ring that actually does some stuff, they are tougher people than I am. I will say that. Eddie Mansfield pussied out because he didn't like that he wasn't getting booked. And he said, I didn't quit the wrestling business quit me. Everybody would have been well within their rights to come after him for what he did, because he did it for himself. He didn't do it for anything other than a selfish goddamn reason, and that's the thing that pisses me off about it. Because you can tell when somebody legit feels betrayed. Bret Hart felt betrayed. Schultz felt betrayed. Others may feel betrayed. Others in any kind of, deal that they're dealing with, they may feel betrayed. anybody over here, whatever they're dealing with, whatever side of the world, whatever wrestling promotion they're in, they may feel betrayed. Well, guess what? Mansfield came across like a piece of shit, which isn't surprising because he, was a goddamn piece of shit and still is a goddamn piece of shit. He goes to show how it's done. He shows there's footage of him showing Stossel all these moves. Many fans even then knew that something was up with wrestling, but they believed it and they bought into it. And then I'm going to get into something here in a little bit, but they show footage, it's like, and Stossel says, or it's like, this sport, well, actually, I shouldn't call it a sport, entertainment, like Stossel's ever done anything athletic in his life. He claims that he wrestled in high school. Well, he must not have been that goddamn good because he got into reporting. He must have been really fucking lousy if he had to get in the report, and I can't imagine anybody would be proud of being beaten by that buggy-whipped little stupid motherfucker. So, and Mansfield goes on to say, I wanted to get health care and benefits for the boys. No, Mansfield, you did it for your fucking self. I want health care and benefits for the wrestlers. I want it as a fan. I see wrestlers, I've been to independent shows where I've seen people beat up their bodies. I've seen people cut, and whether they bladed or they got hit hard way, there was a few times I saw some hard ways. And I've seen people beat their bodies up like crazy and are barely able to walk. You know what I've done? I've slipped them a little extra money. I mean, yeah, I wish that they could get, better health benefits and better stuff like that. And I'm sure back in the 70s and 80s, there wasn't all that much, unless you were in, WWE or even Jim Crockett Promotions and you were a top tier talent, or even AWA to an extent. If you were liked by the promoter, they would take care of you. Sure, there's no exit plan and stuff like that, but then, Eddie, you shouldn't have gotten in the goddamn ring then. Because that is the risk, unfortunately, that a lot of wrestlers take. Cornette says, Eddie Mansfield was a has-been, never was, and he couldn't get booked, and that's why he did what he did. Schultz called him a piece of shit. This is the thing that made me automatically not want to forgive anything that Eddie Mansfield did. He said this quote at one point, or he said this line at one point. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, but Abraham Lincoln forgot to free the pro wrestlers. Now, look, I am not going to say that pro wrestlers aren't treated like cattle. Sure, they're treated like cattle because sometimes if they aren't useful to a company, the company may cut ties with them. That is a cutthroat business. I'm not agreeing with it, but to compare wrestling to slavery, that's what he did. He compared it to slavery. Oh, and people may say I'm twisting the words. No, that's what he fucking said verbatim. That's what he fucking said. He said it on tape or digital or whatever the fuck the file is now. Whatever the form of entertainment is. He said Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, but Abraham Lincoln forgot to free the pro wrestlers. Like Eddie would know anything about what slavery is like. I wouldn't know what slavery's fucking like. So fuck him and fuck the fact that he was ever, goddamn allowed to be in wrestling. And then Vince apparently told Schultz to blast Stossel, verbally. Basically, he's going to come with this 2020 piece and stuff like that. And this is after all this footage, had been shot with Eddie Mansfield. And Schultz shredded Stossel. And Stossel, I think it was like something he was just clearly intimidating him, which, look, Stossel could be intimidated basically by a piece of paper because that's how much of a goddamn weakling he was, and probably and definitely still is, because he tries to suck up to Trump. And any reporter that sucks up to Trump's a goddamn weak-willed, spineless son of a bitch, because they wouldn't know a real man or a real person if it bit them in the ass or slapped them in the face, because Stossel said, I think it's fake, and Schultz slapped him. He should have slapped him harder. He should have sent him to the goddamn hospital because he went easy on him. Let me ask you this much. Why would you say, okay, all these stunts that people pull off in movies, you're going to say that's fake? No, it's, movies are, a work of fiction. Sure, they may be based on books, but they're works of fiction because they're put on film. You're going to say musicians are fake? Sure, in a sense that Milli Vanilli's fake. Sure. I mean, they were people performing, but they were lip syncing. But the whole point is that any form of entertainment or sports, I think it's fake. Well, predetermined, sure. Because some of these moves would absolutely kill somebody. But to say it's fake, he deserved it. Stossel deserved to get slapped. And then he complained later about his injuries. Yeah, poor baby. Anyway, let me talk a little bit later. Schultz was right to do so. Schultz should have hit him harder. Schultz then wrestled Inoki in Madison Square Garden. Vince had to, well, suspend him. Well, actually, he sent him over on a tour to Japan. Mansfield, because, Stossel was going to sue because he didn't like the fact that he got his comeuppance, his deserved comeuppance, so he decided to sue. He decided to do this despite the fact he had no grounds for anything, for any suit. Mansfield said he got death threats, people tried to plant cocaine on him. He probably snorted it, judging by the way he looks. And then he had to move out of the South because people were trying to get to him. He had to have 4 armed guards when he moved to New York. Yeah, Mansfield, my asshole bleeds for you, you stupid, worthless motherfucker. I'm embarrassed that your mother let you be born. If she never had them, we wouldn't be in this situation. This piece wouldn't have been nearly as good. But anyway, he says he's better off now. Why should I take care of it when it didn't take care of me? Eddie, it's because you weren't any good. You weren't any good here. You weren't any good there. You weren't any good anywhere. Or otherwise, you probably would have stuck around. So anyway, Schultz goes to Japan, goes on a tour of Japan, because WWE was working with Antonio Inoki in New Japan at the time for a couple of years. I think it was like 86, 87. I think around that time it stopped. But the Japanese wanted to do the reporter angle thing, and he says, well, okay, if you put it in writing, I'll do it. And that's what it did that, and that didn't help things. And Stossel complained about his ears ringing, and his child was crying, and it hurt his ears, and he couldn't change her diaper. Let me tell you right now, I'm amazed that a dickless wonder like John Stossel was able to even give birth to a kid. Probably, I'm guessing that's not actually his kid, and his wife had to get with somebody that could actually get it up and actually had a dick to be able to impregnate her to have a kid. Because if that is his really real kid, then, well, I guess it was divine intervention, and somehow the kid was created. Well, let me just say this much about John Stossel. He's talking about this and talking about his daughter. Hopefully, if his daughter is alive and healthy, she cuts ties with him and he dies alone, afraid, knowing nobody ever loved or respected him. And nobody should love or respect a guy like that. And yeah, I may be getting hot about this, and I don't fucking care. So anyway, he got what he deserved. He didn't like it. He sued WWE, and then Vince wanted Schultz to sign a paper absolving Vince of blame, but Schultz is like, no, I'll sign something saying you told me what to do. I mean, he didn't say slap him, but it's like, no, you told me to, to shred him, to, stop him. Okay, but I'm not going to say something I didn't do. And that a doctor checked out Stossel and says, well, you got this thing and it's because you're holding on to your pain. Well, he got his 280 grand later and his pain went away. Well, yeah, typical Trump idiot. He got money, so suddenly the problem vanished. Hey, at least he got paid because Trump hasn't paid anybody for anything. Man, Stossel's a fucking piece of shit. Have I mentioned that? So anyway, Mania 1 talk, and Schultz didn't like that Mr. T was being involved, being paid more than a lot of the wrestlers, or any of the wrestlers, which is fair. That is one thing, and not even Mr. T, any of the celebrities. It's fucking bullshit. But, he gets fired by Chief Jay Strongbow because he wasn't supposed to confront Mr. T, but he was talking to him. And in 2019, Hogan said in an interview that Schultz bitch slapped Mr. T, and that's why he got fired. And apparently Hogan and Schultz, their relationship fractured. They were friends before. And he hasn't faced him in a while. He hasn't seen him in a while, talked to him since 85. And then Hogan gets put on the Richard Belzer show, and that famous thing of him doing a front face lock or like a sleeper, and then Belzer collapses, which I don't know if that was a work or not, but it's like Belzer sued or got a settlement out of that. And Belzer was a whiner about that because maybe he shouldn't have, been in it. And I like Belzer on SVU, but it is what it is. Then he became a bounty hunter. The bounty hunter stuff's great. I'm not even going to go into too many details, though. He did talk about one. He made a lot of bank. He did talk about 2 kidnapped girls and that the guy would chain them to the toilet when he left the commode and that they would have to drink the water out of the commode, which was ridiculous. He found the guy in Puerto Rico, rescued the girls. There was a baby back there because of that dance club. He said 2 girls, 2 dogs, a baby. We had a whole group up in there. And then Vince exposed wrestling as entertainment to get out of taxes stuff and whatever. Mansfield said that about forgiving John Stossel, it's not my job, it's God's job. Schultz works on his acres. says he doesn't really care what people think of him. Stossel doesn't like being remembered for that. No, if you could say anything to Schultz, what would you say? Fuck you. No, you wouldn't say that, Stossel, because you had your chance to say that in your prime, in your physical prime. And now, because you wanted to be a baby about the fact that you're only remembered for being smacked around like the bitch you are, no, you have to say that. You wouldn't say that to David Schultz if he was even within 100 miles of you, even within 200 miles of you. You're a piece of shit and a cowardly piece of shit, and so's Eddie Mansfield. David Schultz is the only one that comes out looking good on this. And let me just say this much. I'm not even saying that David Schultz is the greatest guy in the world, but he's goddamn real, and I will believe him more than I will believe anybody else. So yeah, fuck John Stossel. Fuck the fact that he was ever given birth to. I will never forgive his parents for giving birth to him, and the same with Eddie Mansfield. They're both pieces of shit and should have never been allowed anywhere near wrestling. Stossel for the fact that he disrespected it and got slapped around deservedly, and Eddie Mansfield because he decided to be a whiner, complainer. He didn't do it for the boys, he did it for himself. So anyway, now those are my opinions as a fan. I can't wait to get the comments on this one because I'm sure I'm going to piss off a lot of people for stating my opinions and the fact that I feel I'm right. Because it's my opinion. And these are my takes. Anyway, agree, disagree with what I said though, folks. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.